this is a special place. Even if you don't have a degree from here, this is a special place that in my opinion is unlike any other university in the country. And it's because of our people.
How's retired life been going for you?
Retired life is not retired at all. I'm staying pretty busy. You know, when you talk about retirement, it was retirement from OSU. You know, and I had put a number on it and said, you know, 40 years will probably be enough. It has nothing to do with my love of the university or anything else. It's just, man, you know, my car just naturally came on this campus every day for 40 years, and it was just time to do something else. And so I'm enjoying doing, you know, something else that's completely different, but it keeps me motivated and keeps me getting up every morning. So I'll keep doing it.
What's the something else?
I'm the director of operations at Countryside, which is a church here in town. That is, and the good thing about our church is it is 70% college students. So I feel right at home. We have a huge college attendance, and I have always been involved in the college ministry there, and mentor, you know, 7 to 10 guys every semester, you know, through that. And so it's really kind of an extension of OSU. It's just under a different roof.
You said you were at Oklahoma State for 40 years. How did you get here in the first place?
That's a really interesting story. I was a mistake, I think. I really believe that. I went to school at Northeastern State in Talequah. Loved it there. Went to work there the summer after I graduated in their media relations office, and I could not have been happier. I had every friend in the world. My roots were all in Talequah. And in the summer of 1983, a friend of mine called me and said, you know, there's an opening at Oklahoma State in the media relations office. You should apply. And I said, I don't want to. And they said, well, no, you really should. You know, it's Big Eight, you know, that dates me, okay? It's the Big Eight, it's the big time. We think you would do well, you should apply. And I did. I thought, what have I got to lose? You know, I didn't really even think about it much. I applied and forgot about it. And about a month later, I got a call from Pat Quinn, who was my predecessor here. He hired me, and he called me and he said, we'd like to bring you over for an interview. And I said, well, sure, I'll come. So I came for the interview and went through it and liked it, but it never crossed my mind really that this was going to work. And oddly enough, the following week he called me, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, well, you weren't my first choice. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'm happy where I am. And he said, no, he said, here's the deal. We really wanted to hire a guy from Tennessee, but he didn't really want to come. And we just were kind of afraid, you know, maybe you didn't, I'm trying to remember exactly how I put it. Maybe you don't party enough or something like that, you know. And I thought, okay, well, this is strange. So he offered me the job, and in a wild moment, I said, okay. And I took it. And so in October of '83, I headed this way, and I'll never forget the drive here. I cried half the way, and the closer I got to Stillwater, the thought in my mind was, I'm moving to Mars. I mean, no trees, there are, but no trees and flat. And but I got here, and it took that long. And it was like, oh, this is the place.
You felt Stillwater was that different from Talequah?
I thought Stillwater was different than Talequah in a couple of ways. Obviously, OSU is much bigger. Okay, what I found to be what lured me to Talequah in the first place was the friendliness of the people, and you just felt such community here or there. But I found out that here it was the same, just times 10. Okay. So I felt that same warmth and that same acceptance, you know, when I got here. And so it was, you know, it turned out that I'm glad I made the move, obviously.
You were here 40 years. You clearly
I was
liked
here 40 years, and then I'd been here for less than a year, and and Pat Quinn, my predecessor, separated from the job, and he got reassigned to a different job. And Myron Roderick, who was the athletic director at the time, he called me in one day, and I sat in front of his desk, and he looked at me and he said, "I don't know why I'm doing this." He said, I'm gonna put you in the job." But he looked at me and he said, "You're too young, and you don't know what you're doing." And he said, "I will guarantee you, I will fire your butt in a heartbeat if you mess this up." And I said, "Well, thank you for your confidence in me," and went on about it. And and so the gig in athletics lasted for another 23 years.
What was the official job that Roderick gave to you?
Back then it was called Sports Information Director, okay? And then over the years, it's the same job, but they just called it different. Over the years, it transitioned into, Media Relations Director, and then it transitioned into Associate Athletic Director for Media Relations, and so that's what it was when I left, was Associate Athletic Director.
Now we have SIDs for every sport. Were you assigned to one sport, or did you cover all of them?
Back then, we did not have the size of staff that they have now, and so I did something that back then people kind of looked at me with one eye open, because I gave a lot of sport responsibility to students, because I felt like we had to. Those individual sports needed someone that could devote time to them. The director, whoever that was, and it was me, your time was going to mainly be consumed by football and some men's basketball, but mainly football. And so I handed those duties out to students, and man, there have been some great students come through here. I was so fortunate that they took it and ran with it and did it better, probably did it better than I could.
Why do you say that?
I think they had ideas, and I think that they brought technology into the equation that I might not have thought of. I was pretty old school. Never used a computer till I got here. But athletics had the first computer on the OSU campus, and that's a fact that not a lot of people know. But the first computer that was ever used at OSU was used in the athletic department.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was huge. It was the size of that table. But we learned how to do it. But no, they were innovative. They were energetic. They made mistakes, but it was okay, because I knew they were going to give it everything they had.
Got hired in the fall of '83.
Yes.
'84, football goes 10-2.
Unbelievable.
How did that change the scope of your job?
Made it much busier, but it also made it so much fun. And it all started with the end of the '83 season, because that was Jimmy Johnson's last season at Oklahoma State, who I still think was a brilliant football coach. And this program had gone to 2 straight bowl games, maybe 3, and that hadn't happened before. But he went to Miami, bigger city, brighter lights, and that was okay. And Coach Jones, Pat Jones, who's still a dear friend, was the players wanted him, the administration wanted him. He was an obvious hire, so he took the job. And he brought such an interesting. He's such an interesting guy, and he brought such an interesting way of doing things. Intense, passionate, really good football coach. All right. And I'll never forget the way the '84 season started. We were going to Arizona State to open the season, and they had been picked, I think, by Sports Illustrated to win the national championship. And very few people gave us a chance. And we beat them 45-3 at their house. And it was so bad that by the end of the second quarter, that stadium had emptied. And I think that put OSU football on a trajectory, that carried us through 1988, and we all know what happened after that, probation and all those things, and that set us way back. But those years, '84, '85, '86 wasn't a bowl year, but it was a year that set us in motion, because that's the year then player Mike Gundy came and was our quarterback and set the stage for what was going to happen in 80, '87 and '88, which were great seasons.
Let's see how well the Cowboys keep doing on first down. It's a touchdown! Brent Parker from Mike Gundy.
Brought up the '88 season. That team was dynastic. What did that team, or what does that team mean to this university 35 years later?
Team would have won a national championship if you had put that offense in '88, okay, with the '85 defense. That team would have been unbeatable. But you can't do that. What that season did was put OSU football on the national map, where it has stayed through thick and thin, okay? And the reason it was is because of Barry Sanders. Because Barry was a generational talent, had a season that will never be duplicated. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb there. It'll never be duplicated. He was, in my opinion, and I invite anybody to argue with me, the best player to wear the uniform at the college level, any position.
Not just a college level.
College level. Best football player ever at the college level. Just what he could do. What he could do with the football in his hands was amazing. And people that weren't around and didn't watch it should go back and watch some of that. Some of the things he did, unbelievable. So that season in itself, it introduced, I think, what OSU football could be. And then we took a step back, for obvious reasons. But then, we got back on track with Bob Simmons, who came and got our footing back, with us and started recruiting after the probation. And then Les Miles, who was another fabulous football coach. And what both Coach Simmons and Coach Miles could do was beat OU. And that doesn't hurt. And so from that point on, the program has just continued.
This is one of the reasons why he's going for a touchdown. Barry Sanders, 33 yards.
I want to go back to Barry Sanders. You got to be here when he was here during his Heisman season. Now, today we have the internet, Twitter, hype videos, all of that stuff to promote someone's Heisman campaign. What were the challenges in 1988 of putting together a Heisman campaign for Barry Sanders?
The biggest challenge? Barry didn't want to do it.
Why not?
He was too humble. I say too humble. That's a great trait, okay? Unbelievable trait. He didn't want any part of it. He didn't want to do the interviews. He didn't want to be on TV. He didn't want to talk to reporters. He wanted to play football and go to school and take a nap. That was it. And so he was, I love Barry, but he was a challenge, to get him to do. And the other challenge that year was television was, college football TV was sort of in its infancy. I mean, don't get me wrong, it existed, but it wasn't anything like it is today. You had some really basic and pretty homemade regional telecasts that not very many people watched. You had the national telecast, but we didn't have any of those that year. I think the OU game might have been on ESPN. National might have been regional. I don't remember. But so that was a challenge, to get the word out on Barry to a country that was hearing about him, but didn't get a chance to watch him. And it's like I said a minute ago, to watch him run with the football was unlike anything you've ever seen. And so we fought that all year, and we didn't have the biggest budget in the world. I mean, even back then there were Heisman Trophy candidates that their schools would purchase, the side of buildings in New York City and put their picture there and, do some unbelievable things. We didn't have the resources to do that.
And the winner, and I know him now as you will know him, is Barry Sanders of Oklahoma State University.
What was it like watching him win the trophy at the end of the season?
as satisfying and exciting a moment as I had here, because you think we thought he was going to win, but it's like you just don't know until they say his name. And so there was some anxiety, and it was different because we were in Tokyo, which was strange. But no, when they announced his name, it was like, okay, he did it. He did it. And I'll be honest with you, there was a part of me that said we did it, because we did do some things for him. We did promote him as best we could, especially on the West Coast, where we felt like he needed a boost. And he won every single region in the Heisman voting overwhelmingly. Now, would he have won the Heisman Trophy if we had just done nothing? Probably, because those numbers are undeniable. But we couldn't take that chance.
As we said, that team lives in infamy at this school. People always reference the 1988 team. What is your favorite story or memory of that team?
Well, there are so many. There's so many. After the Texas A&M game, when it was obvious that Barry, was the real deal. We knew he was the real deal, but then it was like, no, this is serious. And Coach Jones called me the next morning, and he said, we got to get serious about this, because this is going to happen, okay? And we need to get on this train. And so I remember that specifically because we had talked about it before and say, what do we need to do? And a coach, and rightfully so, a coach is always a little bit leery of hyping one player, of putting all the hype on one player, because it sends an interesting message to the rest of the team. And he was particularly sensitive to that. But at this point, no, we needed to do it. And the other thing about that season was the whole Heisman presentation in Tokyo, which presented so many challenges on so many different levels. It never happened before that the potential winner was going to be in a foreign country the day they announced it. And so we worked with CBS. Back then the presentation was on CBS, and we worked with them for a month leading up to it. They knew he was going to be in Tokyo. They knew he might win it. They knew he was going to be in the Final Three. So we worked with them to have him live from Tokyo, at that moment, which was going to be very early in the morning on game day. And when we talked all this over with Barry, he said, sure, yeah, that's fine. When we got there, and that day that it was coming, and after practice one day in Tokyo, he walked up to me and he said, that thing that we're doing, that thing.
Casual.
And I said, you mean the Heisman thing? And he said, yeah. He said, I don't want to do it. Yeah, that's what I said. It was like crickets. Okay, you don't want to do it. Are you kidding me? And he went on to explain it. He said, no. He said, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to play and win a football game. And that's game day, and it interrupts my routine that I have on game day. And he said, it just isn't going to work. And I'm at the same time thinking, okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate your desire to stay in your routine. And at the same time, I'm going, doggone you. What do you mean you're not going to do it? And so I let him walk away and went to Coach Jones, and in typical Coach Jones fashion, I told Coach, I said, Barry says he's not going to do it. And Pat said, yeah, if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to.
What did you do?
I did an end run. I went to the university president who was on the trip and talked to him about it. And of course, he had a different take on it. And he said, of course he's going to do it. What do we need to do to make this work? And so anyway, we all reconvened at the hotel. And then Coach Jones obviously was back on board just like that. And he doesn't remember this story quite like I do. I've heard him tell this story, and it's not the same, but that's okay. I remember it because I got called every name in the book by the CBS producer that I had to call just in case he decided he wasn't going to do it. And yeah, it was interesting. But anyway, Barry finally said, I'll do it if my entire offensive line will go with me to the CBS News Bureau in downtown Tokyo, if they'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go with me for that. And of course, at that point, I said, well, that's a no-brainer. Of course they'll go with you. And they did. So we all got into stretch limos at 3 o'clock in the morning in Tokyo and went to the CBS News Bureau, and he won the Heisman. And if you go back and watch the video of that, it's fascinating to watch his face, because he's sitting there and the expression on his face is typical Barry, and it's just emotionless. And they announce his name, and you'll notice he cracks just the faintest smile, you know. So he had given this, I'm not interested in this. A lot of people thought that meant I don't want it. He never intended that. It's not that he didn't want the award, it's that he didn't want to go through, he didn't want the attention on him.
I wouldn't want to wake up at 3 a.m. on game day either to accept an award.
Really?
I mean, I would do it.
Of course you would.
But that's me now, as a 21-year-old in college, you know, and you're trying to, I can see how someone would not want to put themselves above the team and be like, I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. to go accept this award, and hopefully I'm rested by the time, you know.
Right. No, and he didn't want any part of it. But you know what? It didn't hurt him, because he had an incredible day against Texas Tech. Single-handedly beat them. It was.
All worked out.
It all worked out.
You know, my teammates, they work so hard. You know, my offensive line, my fullback, Garrett Limbrick, and, you know, they've been getting left out of a lot of things. And it's just hard to see myself getting a lot of credit and see those guys, you know, just getting put beside to the shelf.
We've talked about the talent that Barry Sanders was at Oklahoma State. You said best college football player, period. However, there was a lot of talent at Oklahoma State in 1988.
Think about it. You mentioned Barry, best football player ever, okay? Played here, 1988. The best baseball player on the planet in 1988, Robin Ventura, played here. The best wrestler on the planet, John Smith, wrestled here in 1988. The best golfer on the planet that year, Scott Verplank, played here. I mean, you look back at that year and that era, and it wasn't just in '88, because we did talk about Thurman Thomas. Thurman Thomas was a tremendous football player, okay? Back even further than that, Leslie O'Neal, tremendous football player. We could go on and on and on, but just in that one year, to think that those four athletes who were the best at what they do all walked on this campus and walked these halls, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it's happened before and after, but I'd be hard pressed to tell you where it was.
Now Thurman picks his way close and in.
Talked a lot about Barry, but Thurman, you brought up Thurman, he was here too. Do you think he was overlooked because of Barry?
No, Thurman played, okay? He started, and Barry was his backup. I will always be somewhat sorry that Thurman didn't get more national attention than he did, because he was so good. He was so good, and he represented us so well. He also had an injury, I think, before his junior season, maybe before his senior season. But man, what a great player, and he proved to be, that when he got to the NFL. What a great career, and what a great ambassador for us. And so, he finished in the top 10 in the Heisman, but I wish it had been higher.
Inside that 10-yard line, which you can barely make out. Thomas busts one. Second touchdown for Thurman Thomas.
We have the 1988 team. 2 years later, switching to basketball.
Yeah.
Another legend comes to Stillwater. Coach Eddie Sutton.
Eddie Sutton.
What was it like hiring him?
Surreal, because you obviously being here, you knew Eddie Sutton, you knew the name, okay, but never in your wildest dreams would you ever think, okay, this man may coach here, even though he was from here. And he would tell the story himself. There was a time when he wanted to come here, and OSU didn't want him. Early on in his career, okay, before all of the success, and so it just the timing was just unbelievable. Leonard Hamilton leaves and goes to Miami, and Leonard had started the rejuvenation of OSU basketball through recruiting, and had brought in talent that was unbelievable. He recruited Corey Williams and Derwin Alexander and Cornell Hatcher and a lot of those people that were on Eddie's first few teams, and they were incredible. So we get wind of the fact that Eddie Sutton's coming, and it's like, wow, this is great. But it was the day that changed. I think it changed OSU and certainly OSU basketball in one day when he came here.
Wow.
Hall of Fame coach, unmistakable credentials, that got an opportunity through some hardship, okay, that he had to go through. Wanted to coach again, all right. Not sure that opportunity would come, okay, anywhere else but here, but it came. And so one of our own was able to come home to finish a career that needed to go, that wasn't finished. But the other thing was, it pulled the OSU basketball family together, because there was a faction of OSU basketball that was the Henry Iba, the Mr. Iba faction, and he was OSU basketball, okay? No matter what happened after he retired, before Coach Sutton got here, Mr. Iba was OSU basketball. And so there was a faction of his players that I think had kind of drifted away. But Eddie played for him. And so in that one hire, you not only hired a Hall of Fame basketball coach, but you reunited the Iba family with OSU basketball. And it was the happiest day, I think, in Mr. Iba's life, the day he got to introduce Coach Sutton as the new basketball coach here.
The Oklahoma State basketball program took a new direction on April 11, 1990. That's when Mr. Henry Iba introduced Eddie Sutton as the Cowboys' new head basketball coach. It was not only a great day for Oklahoma State University, but a great day for Coach Sutton as well, because it meant the local boy was coming back home, and Oklahoma State basketball now had an opportunity to return to the glory days.
The happiest day.
The happiest day in his life.
That's a very bold
It's
statement.
a very bold statement.
Why do you think that?
Because Mr. Iba was so loyal to his guys, and Eddie was his guy, and he wanted one of his guys here, and just the way that it all came together was perfect. And of course, we know what happened then. Final Fours, conference championships, Sweet 16s, almost immediately. An arena that was packed and loud, the best basketball atmosphere in the country without exception.
What do you think it meant to Coach Sutton to be the one to pack Gallagher Iba Arena?
It meant, I think I know he took so much pride. He wanted, obviously, at that point, he wanted to be here, but he wanted to be here, and he wanted to bring basketball back, and he did. And the support that he got, and the way that he endeared, Coach Sutton was unique in a lot of ways. So approachable. The entire community became endeared to him, because if somebody on the street walked up to him and wanted to talk, he would talk. He wasn't unapproachable. He wasn't this legend in a glass box that that you couldn't get to. And so I think people felt like, he's our treasure, and he's here, and we love this, and everybody responded. Everybody responded.
Sounds similar to Coach Boynton in the approachability factor.
It is, and that's why I think Coach Boynton is another treasure, because you just don't find that. You don't find that sometimes. Now I've been out of it for some years, but I still know people who are in it and talk to them a lot, and I don't think you find that with a lot of high-profile head coaches.
And now a graduate of Oklahoma State, Eddie Sutton, has brought his team back to the Final Four.
You sort of brushed on the fact that Coach Sutton took us to the Final Four in 1995. Throughout that was some of his other accomplishments as a head coach. What was that 95 season like, making it to the Final Four?
Well, it was a great season that none of us will ever forget. But the two things that stand out to me in the regional final, I think it was the regional final. I may get this anyway. We were playing UMass, and John Calipari was their coach, and I'll never forget. It was a tight game, and I'll never forget what John Calipari said in that post-game press conference when they were asking about the game and how it went kind of back and forth. And they were asking about it, and he said, this is pretty simple. He said, when you're in a tight game like that, and as a head coach, if I look at that other bench and see Eddie Sutton, it's not going to turn out good. Enough. But I also remember after winning that regional, my basketball assistant at the time was Mike Strauss, who then went on to be at the University of Kansas, and he's now out of the profession as well. But I just remember when that game, when the clock hit triple zeros, we just looked at each other and went, "Holy moly! We're going to the Final Four." And it was a sense of, this is unbelievable, but it was also a sense of, we can't imagine what this is going to be like. The work, the getting ready, and you had a week, or less than that actually, to get ready. But it was an incredible experience, and one that none of us will ever forget. Wish we'd beaten UCLA in that first game, but we didn't.
Still got to Final Four.
We got to the Final Four, and then watching Bryant Reeves destroy the backboard on the practice day the day before, that was another one. They'll never forget it.
Hi everybody, I'm Jim Nance, and it's great to have you with us here on Super Saturday. The UCLA Bruins into the regular season ranked #1 in the polls, and they are the favorite here at the Final Four. However, Oklahoma State arrives in Seattle wearing the glass slipper. And yesterday at the shoot-around, Big Country was wearing out the glass backboards. He shattered the backboard. You've probably seen it by now, and they have shattered the dreams of 4 other...
Talked about Eddie Sutton playing for Coach Iba. You also had a relationship with Coach Iba.
Mm-hmm.
What was your friendship like with him?
Unbelievable. And I've said this to many people before. If I had only stayed at OSU for 10 years, it would have been totally worth it, because of the opportunity that I got to become a friend of Mr. Ibas. He was the second person I met when I came here, the first day I came here, because he was in Pat Quinn's office, and he stood up and shook my hand and was asking me questions. And he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I told him, and he said, "Where'd you go to school?" And I told him, and he said, "Well, you're here now, so you're one of us." And from that point on, it just, and I can't tell you why. There were, huge difference in our ages. But the last probably 4 or 5 years of his life, he would come to my office almost every day and sit in my office, he and I, and talk basketball. Now, how many people got an opportunity to do that with someone of his basketball stature? I mean, I look back at that and think, man, how blessed was I just to be able to listen to him talk. And I could talk all day about Mr. Iba and stories, okay? But the one that comes to my mind, and everybody remembers, Bobby Knight, who's still alive in Lubbock. But everybody remembers when in an exhibition game against the Russians. And I don't remember what year it was, but he threw a chair across the floor. And Bobby Knight loved Coach Iba, loved him, considered him as good as it gets. And the next morning, after Coach Knight threw that chair, Mr. Iba walked in my office, and he sat down and he said, "Get Bobby Knight on the phone." And I said, "Okay, sure." He gave me the number. I called it. Secretary answered. I said, "Yeah, I'm calling from Stillwater for Coach Iba, who would like to visit with Coach Knight." And I'll never forget her. She said, "Well, Coach Knight's at practice, but who did you say was calling?" And I told her again, and she said, "Oh, well, just a moment." There was silence on the phone for maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, and all of a sudden, he's there. He's there. He said, oh. And I said, Coach, please hold for Coach Iba. And I handed the phone to Mr. Iba, and he unleashed on him. He said, Bob, have you lost your mind? He said, you can't do that. People already think you're, I can't even remember the words he used, and I probably couldn't use them here anyway. And he went on, but there was so much respect, And when Mr. Iba passed in 93, Coach Knight was the first person that I called, because Coach Knight had saved Mr. Iba's life after Mr. Iba's wife died early on. He sort of went into seclusion, and Coach Knight wouldn't let it happen. He flew to Stillwater, and Coach Knight was coaching the Olympic team, and it was '84. And he went to his house, and he rattled him. He said, "You're not going to sit in this house and die. You're coming to Bloomington, and you're going to help me coach this Olympic team." And he did. And I think that kept Coach Iba alive. Not a lot of people know that. Kept him alive for a while. But anyway, I called Coach Knight to tell him that Mr. Iba had passed, and I'll never forget. And the quote, I think, is still down in the hall somewhere. But Coach Knight said to me, "Well, whatever you put out for public release," he said, you make sure you quote me, and I'm going to give you the quote." And he said to me, "Of all the shadows cast on the game of basketball, his was the largest."
Powerful
stuff.
We've talked about the highlights, the 1988 team, Final Four, Heisman trophies. However, you've also been here through some of the tragedy this university has experienced. What happened on January 27th, 2001?
The worst night of my life.
January 27th, OSU lost 10 special members of the family. At this time, please join us as we take a moment to remember each of them with a moment of silence.
And so many other people. And you don't want to ever make something like that personal, okay? Because it impacted so many people. But we didn't ask for it, but we got it. And that night is as vivid as it might as well have just happened yesterday, because I remember everything. And I remember I was at home because I had put Will Hancock, who was my assistant, he went on that trip. And Bill Tegans, who was my best friend at the time. We talked every day. And I was sitting at home that night, and it was a little after 8 o'clock, and I got a phone call from an Associated Press writer in Denver. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "I'm sorry to bother you, and I really don't want to talk cryptically, but can you just tell me if all of your airplanes got back from Boulder?" And I said, "What? What are you asking me?" He said, "I'm sorry, but did all of your airplanes get back from Boulder?" And I said, "I have no idea." And I was on the verge of saying, what's going on here? If you think this is funny, don't, go away. And he said, "Well, I'm sorry to bother you." He said, we've heard that maybe something happened, but he said, "I can't verify it, I'm just checking." And I said, "Man, I haven't heard." I said, "But I'll check." Hung up, and I just remember sitting down in my living room and had a sinking feeling. It's like that wasn't a prank. Something's going on. And the first thing I did was I tried to call Will and went to voicemail. And I tried to call Bill, and it went to voicemail. And then I called Coach Sutton's administrative assistant, and I of course, at this point, I'm thinking, okay, who do I call? I called her, and I asked her, and of course, she just kind of went into, as she should have, it's like, why? What's going on? Why? And about that time, the same guy from the AP called me again, and he said, "I'm sorry to bother you again," but he said, I now know that one of your airplanes went down. He said, "I don't have any details, but they've confirmed that it was one of your airplanes." He said, "I don't know anything else." And so at that point, it was like, okay, you just kind of put everything on auto drive, and you just go do a job. I drove to the airport, and I got there just as the second plane, which Coach Sutton was on, was landing. And I met Eddie as he got off the plane, and he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Coach, I got a funny phone call, and two of them actually, and do you know anything about that third airplane?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I heard that they were having some mechanical problems, but," he said, "I think they were going to just land somewhere and take care of it." And so he went on about his way, and then the calls started coming in at that point, and it was, they were able to say, "Yeah, it was definitely your plane, and it's bad." So all the other two planes were in. My phone is ringing constantly. I can't take all those phone calls. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't know why I did this, but my first instinct was to go to the parking lot and see whose cars were still there. Because, I knew what Bill drove, and I knew what Will drove, and they were both there. And so at that point, it was obvious to me that they were both on that airplane. But we still didn't have any details. But then we gathered at basketball offices were in Cordell while the arena was being renovated. So we all gathered there, and it was the worst that you can imagine. Players, girlfriends, families, weeping. Walked into Coach Sutton's office, and he was sitting at his desk, and I cannot imagine the hurt, but he was solid as a rock. And he said, I'm going to call these families, because at that point it started to be, he knew who was on the plane. We confirmed it. And he started calling those families to tell them. And he got a hold of every one of them except, at that moment, if I remember correctly, got a hold of everyone except the Hancock family. And Bill Hancock is still a great friend. Who's in charge of the college football playoff. And it was his son. And I remember answering his phone call later, and Bill was at home in Kansas City, and he said, "Is it true?" And I just said, I'm so sorry, but yeah. Then as a department, with Dr. Halligan, President Halligan leading the way, we met. Our offices were at Frontier Engineering, so this was a mess, okay? So we met out there pretty much all night to determine, okay, what do we do? And Dr. Halligan said, whatever we do. Well, we went to the airport and had a press conference, and we had to do that. And then we went, to Frontier Engineering. But Dr. Halligan said, whatever we do, we're going to take care of these families first. That's our priority. And so everybody, there were 10 of us well, there were more than that in the room, but 10 of us actually got assigned a family and he was very clear. He said, your job is you take care of everything they need. That's what you're doing. So I had, the Teagan's family, and I had known Janice for forever, and so that's what we did. Was we handled, from my standpoint, handled the media as best we could with whatever information that we could, and love on those families, and go to 10 funerals. And it was something that, here's what I'll say about it. As horrible as it was, and it was, it really gave OSU an opportunity to show who we really are. Okay, it brought the OSU family together for a bad reason. Okay, but I think even to this day, it defines who we are as a university that cares for its own and will take care of its own, and made a promise that night that we will never forget. And there are things that are put in place now that will be in place in perpetuity that we will never forget. And so I think, as bad as it was, I think that if you can look at it and say anything positive came out of it, it is that it helped define us in a good light. No, there are people who care. There are people that promised to take care, and they did.
We promise to always remember, and at Oklahoma State, we keep our promises. So tonight, in honor of those great men, those 10 fallen Cowboys, we are retiring the number 10.
It's been almost 23 years since that incident. What does it mean to you to see Oklahoma State fulfilling their promise to remember the 10?
It means that we're people of our word, and that administrations, however many administrations have come since then, maybe two, I think, three maybe. That word's never been broken. And for me, I had a colleague and a friend on that plane, and 8 other people who I knew, but none of them were blood relatives. Okay, and it's those people who lost sons, okay, husbands, fathers, that you say, no, we have to. And so for us to keep our word, and what it means to them is I'm not sure you can put it into words, because OSU has done such a good job. I give Larry Reese a lot of credit for this, because every year, even when I know there were people in the department that probably didn't want to do it, those families come back in January, and they're welcomed back and made to feel part of it, and their loved ones are remembered and honored, not only in a private dinner, but in a basketball game. And the other thing I will say about Coach Boynton is he has wrapped he wasn't here, but he has wrapped his arms around those families. He comes every year to that dinner. It's a game night, but he still comes, and he goes to every table and shakes a hand or hugs a neck and tells them that they are part of the OSU basketball fabric, and they always will be. That's pretty special.
We have become a whole family because of this accident. All those people have grieved, and it goes beyond my comprehension how you react if you lost a son. I will continue to always remember those guys, and I think that's what Dr. Halligan said. All of you, thank you, and I speak for the families, for helping us heal up at least a little bit.
Thank you, Coach Sutton.
What is your favorite memory, or what was your favorite thing about working in OSU athletics for so many years?
I couldn't come up with one single memory, because there are so many. I think it all folds into the fact that OSU gave me an opportunity to be here. OSU gave me an opportunity to associate and to become friends with Henry Iba and Eddie Sutton, and to work with Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas and Pat Jones and Les Miles and Mike Gundy, all of these people. Okay, OSU gave me that chance, and I look back at that and say, and I heard somebody once. I'm not Hall of Fame worthy for anything, but somebody who was inducted into a Hall of Fame, I'll never forget their statement. They said they were thinking about that honor, and they said they just had to ask. They asked God, "Why have you been so good to me?" Well, I would ask the same question, because were there down, were there lows? Of course, they're with anything, but it introduced me to the OSU community, and I learned. Even after I left athletics, 7 years at the foundation, and then another however many in public safety, and I learned that this is a special place. Even if you don't have a degree from here, this is a special place that in my opinion is unlike any other university in the country, and it's because of our people.